Hello, I am very excited because this month I'm taking part in my first ever readathon. I'm joining in with the Whateverathon Part 2, which is hosted by Book Browsing Blog, and I wanted to take you through some of my TBR, some of my goals for the month, and the team that I've joined for this game. I have been looking for a way to gamify my reading. I just find it really fun. It's not to encourage me to read anymore. I will always read quite a lot. I just love the idea of allocating points and having a bit of fun and adding a bit of a competitive edge to it. So I'm really looking forward to this month. After watching the intro video in May, I joined one of the teams. I didn't do it very strategically, which was a little bit annoying because I joined the Sunset Scholars, mainly because when I was looking through the different hosts, I thought that the YouTube channel that I have the most reading similarities with is Book's Nest. So I thought that would be a good team to join. It was only then that I looked at the bingo cards and realised that one of the prompts on that was dragons, and I don't actually own any books where dragons are part of the main plot. Well, that are present at all. Dragons are not present in any of my books, which in some ways I'm a little bit surprised about given the number of books that I own. But it did mean I had to go and have a look, but I'll come on to that in a minute. So part of the Whateverathon game is to set yourself a reading goal, and then you get points as you read towards that goal, and then if you surpass your goal. Having looked back through my previous month's stats, I do read quite a few books a month, but generally that includes things like photography books, which are often a quicker read. I decided to set my goal a bit lower than what I have traditionally read per month, knowing that this month I want to focus on fiction and longer books. So I set myself a goal of 10 books this month, which is achievable and I think is a realistic goal to reach for. What I've done though is I've given myself a long list of books that I can choose from for that month that meet the prompts, meet the themes that we're going for. So I can still mood read and have a variety, but while still working towards the goals and still working towards the prompts. So I thought in this video I'd take you through some of the books that I've got on that list. Some of them are quite well known, some of them are less well known. If I think they're a bit less well known, I'll talk about them a bit more. But otherwise, some of them, there's no point me going into it because most people know what they're about. Anyone who's searching for booktube channels, booktube content, anyone who's taking part in Whateverathon, I think will already know these books. So yeah, I won't go into too much detail on those. One of the extra points prompts is to read a host favourite. There is only one book on that list that I own, so that's the one I've added, and that is Red Rising. This is one I think that is quite well known, it's quite popular among different channels, but it is the first book in a series. It's quite political, it's got that speculative fiction aspect that I love. So I'm quite looking forward to that, and as I say, that's the only one that I actually already owned. And I think that's quite an important point actually. I have done this based on my TBR shelves. There is only one instance where I've purchased a new book, but I've used an Audible credit that I already had to buy it. One of the prompts is to continue a series. I have 3 books, or 3 series where I could be potentially continuing this month. The first one is The Amber Spyglass. It's the second in His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. This book was recommended to me and kindly lent to me by my best friend. So I've read the first one. This book contains all 3 and I've got the second one to read. So that's one of my possibilities. I won't go into too much on that because I think that's a very commonly known book. The second one, which is less well known, is it's called The Novice's Tale. This is part of a series by Anne Swinfen. I would liken them to cozy mysteries. I've only read the first one, so The Novice's Tale is the second. The first one was The Bookseller's Tale. They are set in medieval England in Oxford. The first one is a murder mystery where a bookseller starts to investigate. It's set in the 1300s, shortly after the plague. I'm reading this series because I'm currently like trying to teach myself about medieval England, and this book series has fantastic detail on the lived experience of people in medieval England. The first book being mainly about the bookseller, goes into a lot of detail on how books are made, or were made back then, how the paper was made, and how the illuminations on the manuscripts were designed and created. I will say it wasn't a favourite read of mine. It was perfect for my purposes of wanting to learn more about medieval England, but it wasn't thrilling. It wasn't an exciting murder mystery. Having read the synopsis for the second one, I'm hoping this one's going to be a bit better now that we've sort of established our characters that are going to be throughout the series. But if I don't enjoy the second one, I don't think I'll continue with the series. But we'll see. And then the third continuous series that I have on my list, I will put my hand up now, is the A Court of Mist and Fury. I have been avoiding the Acotar series. I think because it's so hyped. I think there's something about really hyped books that puts me off, thinking I'm never going to enjoy them as much as some people say. I had also previously been put off the idea of fantasy mixed with romance, but having read a couple of other romance fantasies and really enjoying them, I decided to give A Court of Thorns and Roses a go. I read the first one in May, didn't love it, but was sufficiently intrigued by the end to want to know where the story is going to go. And also I have heard that the first one is generally considered not great and that it does get better. So I'm going to give the second book a chance, see if I like it, see if I want to finish the series. So let's talk about The Dragon's Prompt and the one book that I have purchased new specifically for this game. I'm still evolving in my taste, but I don't think I'm a particularly big fan of high fantasy. So dragons don't feature very heavily on my reading list, as you can probably tell by the fact that there are none on my TBR. So I purchased When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. What I know about this is that it's like a historical speculative fiction. So it's an alternative version of the past. In this case, we're looking at 1950s America and an event in which hundreds of thousands of women suddenly turned into dragons. And I was intrigued by this thing, so I'll read it to you. Kelly Barnhill boldly explores rage, memory, and the tyranny of forced limitations. When Women Were Dragons exposes a world that wants to keep women small, their lives and their prospects, and examines what happens when they rise en masse and take up the space they deserve. So that I think really captures in like one or two sentences the sorts of fiction that I love to read and that I am drawn to. It's that speculative aspect, the feminist aspect. Yeah, so that's now on my Audible list. A couple of other audiobooks that I have on my list, because I do like listening to audiobooks when I walk the dog, or if I go on long car journeys. I don't think I've got any planned. I have Lote by Shola von Reinhold. This one is literary fiction. It's set in Scotland, and it follows a person who becomes fixated on a black Scottish poet. The synopsis suggests that this is an exploration of aesthetics, beauty, and the ephemeral realm in which they exist, which I love the sound of. I'm a little bit concerned because so far I've found literary fiction to be less enjoyable through audio. I prefer to read them physically, to be able to make notes, to be able to mark pages. So I'm a little bit worried that I'm not going to enjoy it on Audible, even though it sounds so up my street. The other audiobook I have is called A Curse of Roses, which is by Diana Pingucha. This one is a young adult fantasy based on Portuguese legend. Again, I'm a little bit concerned because I'm not always a big fan of YA, but I think there's a lot of times when there's a blurring between YA and adult, so we'll see if I enjoy it. But this one is a fantasy, continues this theme of fantasy that I have been reading lately, so another one to see if we enjoy it, but it's got LGBTQ themes. That's what I didn't mention at the beginning, actually. So the whole Whateverathon, you earn extra points if it's LGBTQ. So I have basically collected as many, other than the Novice's Tale and the Amber Spyglass and Acotar. I don't know about Red Rising. I don't actually know very much about Red Rising, but generally I've collected books that are LGBTQ so that I can meet that and really plough on with some of what's on my shelves. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was some of the books that are on my shelves or on my Kindle that are more well known, and therefore I won't go into them. They might not be particularly well known, but potentially the author is really well known. So first of all, we've got The Garden of Eden by Ernest Hemingway, a story of love and obsession. It's about a young American writer and his wife on an extended honeymoon in the Mediterranean, France and Spain, and about the woman to whom they are both attracted. So I won't go into any more detail. I've got Jeanette Winterson's Sexing the Cherry. So I recently read Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson and I loved it. So I'm really intrigued to read some more of her writing. And this one sounds really fascinating. I mean, why would I have it on my shelves if it wasn't fascinating? But Sexing the Cherry celebrates the power of the imagination as it playfully juggles with our perceptions of history and reality, love and sex, lies and truth, and the 12 dancing princesses who lived happily ever after, but not with their husbands. Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyeyemi. This one, I believe, features transgender characters, which is something I want to read more of. I don't think I've read any transgender fiction before, but I really want to add it to my list. So there's a few on this TBR that feature that, and this is one of them. Helen Oyeyemi, I think, is one of the most well-known writers that I've got on my TBR for this game. And then on my Kindle, I have The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. I don't know too much about it. I just know that it's really well loved across BookTube. Felix Ever After by Kaysen Callender, another one that has been very popular on BookTube, so I won't go into that one, but I believe another one that features transgender characters. Detransition Baby by Tori Peters, another very popular one, and another one relating to transgender issues. This Poison Heart by Kaylin Bayron. So this one I'm a bit worried about because it's apparently very YA, but it's on my Kindle, I own it, so I do want to try it and see where I go with it. Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I'm quite intrigued by this one because it's written in verse, and I'm currently reading very slowly The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, which is also written in verse, so I'm looking forward to trying a more modern version of that. And then we have An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green, which is the start of another series, so we'll see. Okay, so let's talk about the less well-known ones. I've got my notes because so some of them I've had to look up because obviously I purchased them because I really like the sound of them, but when they're less well-known, you don't hear about them often, and therefore you sort of forget what they're about when they've been on your shelf for a while. So I'm going to mention these two first. These two are by an indie publisher. And other stories. So we've got Tentacle by Rita Indiana. So plucked from her life on the streets of post-apocalyptic Santo Domingo, young maid Asilde Figueroa finds herself at the heart of a Santeria prophecy. Only she can travel back in time and save the ocean and humanity from disaster. But first she must become the man she always was, with the help of a sacred anemone. Tentacle is an electric novel with a big appetite and a brave vision, plunging headfirst into questions of climate change, technology, Yoruba ritual, queer politics, poverty, sex, colonialism, and contemporary art. Bursting with punk energy and lyricism, it's a restless, addictive trip. The Tempest meets a telenovela. Very excited. And then Swimming Home by Deborah Levy. So this one I wasn't sure whether people would have heard of because Deborah Levy is a more well-known author, but this one sounds quite similar to The Garden of Eden. It's about a husband and wife. So a woman basically comes into a marriage and it's about the story that happens around that. So looking forward to that one too. So I purchased a while ago a stack of books from the Women's Press Science Fiction collection. And these three I've added to this TBR. I have The Adventures of Alex by Joanna Russ. This is a collection of 4 short stories about 4 different characters, all called Alex. Yeah, so I'm not really sure what else to say about it, but yeah, 4 different characters called Alex. It's sci-fi, it's, I imagine, speculative, and it's feminist. The other, Joanna Russ, is the female man. And in a similar way, we've got characters who all meet, who are all variations of the same person. So we've got Joanna, Janine, Janet, and Jael. Again, I don't really know what to tell you about it. It's sci-fi, feminist, speculative, we'll see. And then the third one from that collection, but by a different author, is Memoirs of a Spacewoman by Naomi Mitchison. And this one explores ideas that I've never read about in books before. So there's supposedly going to be some interplanetary relationships, and also the exploration of, I don't know what the term is, of a hermaphrodite. So Mary explores her own sexuality with colleagues and with friends such as the hermaphroditic Martian Bly. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. I don't really know what to say about it other than that, but yeah, that's another one. And remember, I'm not planning on reading every single one of these books. It's just, these are my list of options. I've got Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud, and this is how different lives interweave. It's about being an immigrant. I believe there's LGBTQ themes. I have absolutely no idea. And one of the oldest ones from my TBR is The Confessions of Franny Langton by Sarah Collins. I wasn't sure whether to put this on the well known, because I'm pretty certain I picked this up from a charity shop because I'd heard someone talking about it, but I'm not sure. You don't tend to see it anymore, but this is historical fiction, LGBTQ, I think about a woman and her maid. The Emperor Waltz. So this is one of the biggest ones, other than A Court of Mist and Fury. This is one of the biggest ones on my TBR, and is sort of the one that I'm saying I'll read if I manage to finish, if I get through 10 books, my goal of 10, I'll pick this up. So this is called The Emperor Waltz. It's by Philip Hensher, and not only because of its size, but because of its themes, I think this is possibly the most daunting, and I genuinely don't know how to describe it. So delving deep into the human spirit to explore connections between love, sanctity, commitment and virtue, Philip Hensher takes as his subject small groups of men and women tightly bound together, trying to change the world through the example of their lives. So yeah, I've no idea. No, I think that's it. I think that's everything. So quite a list of possible books to read. I think what I might do, if I get the time, is check in with you regularly. Because what I was going to do is do an update at the end to tell you what I've read. But that might end up being quite a long video, and I don't want to do too long a video, especially when I'm so new. So what I might do is check in with you a couple of times during the month to let you know what I've been reading and whether I've liked it, and hopefully with some of these less well-known ones give you a better idea of what they're about, because I don't think I did a very good job of explaining that. So I'd love to know what you're reading. I'd love to know if you're involved. If you have a YouTube channel and you're going to be doing videos, let me know. I'd really like to watch them.